think it's time to begin today. It is a pleasure to have here today Sara Lucatello, and she began her studies in Padua, working especially on high resolution spectroscopy of old stars, old clusters, etc. After Padua, she moved around a lot in the US and in Germany. She resided for a few years, and she's back in Italy, in Padua in particular. She's still working on high resolution spectroscopy. For instance, she's the PI on the foremost Sala cluster surveys together with Antonella Valdenandi. And but she's here today because she's also the president of the European Astronomical Society, and she's the first Italian to lead the society, and she's the first woman to lead the society. So we asked her to give us a presentation about the Astronomical Society and what it can do for astronomy in general and for astronomers in particular.
Thank you, Angela, for the introduction. It's a very nice introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here today, this morning. It's wonderful to see so many people here and online. This is the first time I speak in this room, and it's a bittersweet moment for me because it's named after my very dear friend Antonio, who I miss very much, like I'm sure many of you. So it's special also for this reason. Okay, without further ado. So as Angela mentioned, I've been asked to tell you a little bit about European Astronomical Society, what we do, what are our different activities. I will try to give an overview and not to get too details because details might be boring, but at any times, if you have questions, please interrupt me. That's not an issue. I'm happy to answer. And of course, in the end, there'll be time for questions. And even after the question time, I'm going to be here in the afternoon if you want to speak to me. But again, it's very informal. Feel free. Okay. So, ready? Does this work? No, it stopped working again, so I'm going to give up on this. Oh, but it seems like it's something more serious. My computer. Okay. All right. A little bit of history. Let's start from the beginning. So in the late 80s, ESO was already on the way to become the astronomical superpower that we know today. It was about to finish the commissioning of the NTT. It was already thinking about the VLT, so there were all these plans in mind. And several countries had joined ESO, and it was truly establishing itself as a European force in astronomy. And so a former ESO Director General, Lo Bolcher, writes this little document in '88 that we still have in our archives, in the archive of the Society in Geneva, in which he argues for the formation of the European Astronomical Society. The idea was not only at the time, the most felt need was that of organizing meetings, of creating a community and exchanges, but more importantly, they were thinking about promoting exchange between Eastern and Western Europe. Most people in the room are quite young. You've lived in a world in which that was that's never been an issue, but there was a time in which that was not so easy. And even scientific exchanges was not immediate, not only because, of course, the internet was not a thing back then, but also because there were true political divisions that made it much, much more difficult than it is today to host scientists to travel to the East and for Eastern scientists to travel to the West. And more importantly, it was perceived by Lo Bolcher himself, but a group of senior European astronomers, that it was important to create the European culture of astronomy as a group, right? Not only the individual countries working on their own, holding their national meetings, but a collaboration at a wider dimension, not only because of ESO, but independently of ESO, because let's not forget that ESO super important, of course, but it's ground-based optical astronomy, then infrared astronomy, and astronomy is much more than that. So it was considered the need of a European Astronomical Society was felt quite strongly by this group of people. So in 1990, the society was founded in Switzerland under a civil code, under civil Swiss code, with the aim, the global aim of promoting and advancing astronomy in Europe. Now, I thought it was interesting to show this picture. This is an old picture of an excerpt from an article on the Messenger announcing the foundation of the society on the 10th of October, 1990. I thought it was interesting to show that this meeting took place in Davos. That was the first meeting. So astronomers were the original people who met in Davos. Much before it became fashionable for uber rich and uber influential people. So we were the original Davos meeting. There were 600 founding members all across Europe, including Eastern Europe, which was quite a novel idea. 13% of the founding members were from Italy. So that was a considerable fraction of the members. And there was already from the first governance, from the first governing body, the council member was from Italy. One of the, Rodonò was actually one of the first council members for the EAS. So the governance of the society was described and established in the original bylaws and indicate that the society is governed by an elected council until 2023, including 2022. The council was made up to 10 people. That was the rule. And in 2022, the constitution, the bylaws were changed to expand the council to reflect the wider variety of activities that we have, because the society has grown so much. So right now, there are up to 12 councillors. There are 5 officers of the society. There's the president, 2 vice presidents, Nabila Khanim and Lex Caper. We have a treasurer, Nick Lafis, who's from Greece, council secretary, Andrea Gombok, and we have 7 councillors from different countries. The elections are held regularly, which means on average every 2 years. Sometimes it happens because a councillor resigns before we have elections more often. Any member can run. So if you're interested and you're a member, an email will come to you several months before the election takes place announcing the possibility to run, and you can say, I'd like to run. All the candidacies are then vetted by a nomination committee, which is a completely independent body from the council and the society. There are a number of senior astronomers, senior scientists, they're not only astronomers, across Europe, who have only the task of making sure that the council is a fair representation of the community. So they make sure that there is geographical representation, gender diversity in the council, and also seniority diversity. So that is the only vetting they do. So of course, if someone wants to run and there are already 2 councillors from that country, it's unlikely they will actually be put on the ballot. However, they will not exclude candidates for any other reasons. So as I said, if you're interested, you can run. It's absolutely open. Not a lot of people come forward, which is too bad, especially from Italy. It is truly not a country that gets involved, and that is unfortunate because we're such a productive and lively astronomical community, and I believe we could be involved much more and we could affect much more the policy of European astronomy. The standard term is 4 years. Councillors can serve twice in a given role. They can be elected twice to a given role, but they can be elected a 3rd time if they change role during their, say, in my case, I've been elected as vice president, and then I've been elected as president, and that is okay. I can do 3 terms because I changed my position. We have office and admin support in Geneva. We have a small office, and we're hosted by the University of Geneva. Historically, we've always been in Geneva in different locations. Right now, I think for over 10 years, the University of Geneva has been hosting us. It's a small society in terms of budget and administrative support. We're nothing like the IAU or even more the American Astronomical Society, but still we're quite well organized within our means. Since our council is made of 12 astronomers who have full-time jobs as scientists or teachers or professors or directors of observatories often, we engage the help of experts in our advisory committees. That means that some of our activities are beyond our expertise, and so we get help from experts. often from outside astronomy on specific tasks. The advisory committee right now are the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion, Sustainability Committee, the Satellite Constellation in Astronomy Committee, and the Policy Committee. Especially in satellite constellation and policy, we need considerable expertise from outside, experts in European law and policy and industry development. And so those are generally outside experts and not astronomers. We have, since the very beginning of the society, it was envisioned that the EAS would have special relations with the affiliated societies, which are essentially national astronomical societies. We started with a handful originally at the foundation, and we've now grown to have 32 affiliated societies. Keep in mind that in this context, European does not mean European Union. It's a geographical definition. We have several countries within our group of affiliated societies which are not EU members: Switzerland, UK, Turkey, Ukraine. So this is a pan-European organization. It's not a political, it doesn't have to do with the EU. It's not a political definition. It's a geographical definition. Working with the affiliate society is one of the ways in which we keep contact with our members and we understand better the needs of our members. Of course, the National Society has a much better feeling, much better pulse of what are the national needs, the reality of their community, especially for what concerns communities that are not as well integrated, say in ESO, for instance. So it's vital for us to have this connections to the affiliated societies. We meet at least twice a year, sometimes virtually, but generally in person. This is one of our virtual meetings, but we generally have twice a year in-person meetings in which we discuss initiatives we might do together or ways in which we can empower affiliated society, or they could share good practices. And in some cases, they also give us advice in terms of strategy and future endeavors to undertake. So our membership, as I said, initially 600 founding members, and it remained fairly constant. It grew not very widely until 2018, when we changed our membership scheme. So instead of having people join the European Astronomical Society as individuals, we offered another option, meaning that if they were members of an affiliated society, they could become members of the EAS without a further expense by just asking to become a member. This has been a game changing for us, and this has increased our membership by a lot. You can see in the table, there's the year, and the first row, let's see this, yes. You can see the total number of members, and since the implementation of the new membership scheme, you can see below the number of members that became EAS members through the affiliated societies. And you can see that today, the vast majority of our members are through our affiliated societies. In our view, this is fantastic because this is exactly what we wanted, meaning we wanted to bring together different communities under a common group, a common representation for what concerns acting on European matters at the international level.
So
Yes.
the total is 5,000, it's not 10,000.
No.
Yeah, I mean, 2025.
Yes.
The total of affiliated. Okay.
No.
95% of them are affiliated to
Yeah.
society.
Yes.
It's not 10,000. You have not. It's already the total.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the total number. I'm sorry. And this is the number of members that are members through affiliated society. So you can see that less than 300 people are individual members. Individual members still exist. There are people who do not reside in Europe, typically Americans, Australians that decide to become members either because they came from Europe originally or because, and this is a very popular reason to become a member, it gives you a discount on signing up for a meeting. And so a lot of people just join for that reason. And there are also a few limited number of lifetime members, people who joined a while ago generally, and they decided to join with a higher rate, but they would be members for life. But that's very small percentage. Just as a comparison to give you an idea of the other large societies, The largest is the IAU by far, it's 13,000 members. It's very large. Followed by the American Astronomical Society, which is, however, a national society that has about 8,000 members. And it is extremely well funded and extremely well organized, very professionally organized. Then we have the Royal Astronomical Society, which is perhaps the oldest existing astronomical society, still standing astronomical society. That is a special case because it has both astronomers and geophysicists for historical reason. It's about 2,000 astronomers there, about as many geophysicists, perhaps many a little bit more. Other large societies, these are the largest ones I'm aware of. There are other large societies around a couple of thousand. The African Astronomical Society is another international society that has been growing quite steadily, and this is fantastic to see because the African community has been truly growing and developing in an incredible way. It's truly awesome to see that happening. This Italian Astronomical Society is quite small. It's about 300 members. It's very old. It's over 100 years old, but it never grew very much beyond those numbers. In fact, today, Italian members to the European Astronomical Society are just 3% versus 13% at the beginning. And we're also an unusual case because whereas for essentially all the countries, all the members from that country to the AS come through the affiliated society, that is not true for Italy. About half of the Italian members are independent members because they decided not to join the Italian Astronomical Society, but just to join the EAS. Okay. We also have organizational members. As you can imagine, since most of our members join our society completely for free, we make essentially no revenues whatsoever. Well, tiny amount of revenues from membership dues. But thankfully, we have a number of organizational members that are institutes, research institutions, or organizations in general that support us in the undertaking of our activities. We have several, we have over 30 at different levels. These I'm just showing the patrons, which is the highest level of contribution to our work and activities. And I wanted to show this because I'm very proud that INAF is actually one of our patrons has been generously contributing. And I have to say this started before I was president, so it's nothing to do with me. It was an independent endeavor on the side of INAF, which I hope will keep on happening. And I'm looking at Andrea here because he's the guy that decides on the money who will keep on happening in the future. He's not listening to me right now. But I really hope we'll get that support because our activities, we do, you know, it's not that they cost a lot of money, but they do cost some money to put together all the different endeavors that we work on. So what do we do? So we do a lot of things. I'm going to give you a few general chapters of things we do, and I'm going to give you a little bit of details afterwards. As I said, it's not going to be everything, some of it. So our overall mission is to promote and advance European astronomy, actually to promote and advance astronomy in Europe and beyond. So we do promote research excellence. We promote collaboration quite heavily. That's one of our core missions. It's probably the most visible thing we do. But we also do other things that are less visible, but equally important. We advocate quite staunchly for astronomy in front of policymakers and in front of funding agencies quite extensively, including, for example, of the protection of dark and quiet sky. It's one of our core activities for the last few years. We support training initiatives for early career researchers and enhance participation for underrepresented groups. And we champion good citizenship in astronomy quite actively. So starting from our most visible activities, as I mentioned, promoting collaboration, promoting excellence. The activity we're probably most famous for, and the activity that a lot of people know, even if they might not necessarily know it comes from the European Astronomical Society, is organizing the EAS meeting, annual meetings. So the EAS annual meeting became a rather well-known brand, but through different incarnations, it started almost immediately after the society was formed with a so-called JENA meeting, Joint European and National Astronomy Meeting, which were jointly organized by the very small at the time European Astronomical Society, together with all the other national societies that were typically larger than the European Astronomical Society. And perhaps some of you, the older in the rooms, might have attended one of the JENA meetings. They went on until 2008. And then it became the European Week of Astronomy and Space Science. Perhaps some of you attended one. There was one edition that took place in Rome. And in those incarnation actually was organized by the European Astronomical Society with the help of the local society. So the one in Rome was organized by SAID, by the Italian Astronomical Society, together with the EAS. And after 2020, we started with COVID, we decided with that. It actually became just organized by us. At the time had become a much larger society. And it has now established as the largest annual astronomical event in Europe, which is routinely attended by well over 1,000 people. The next one, which is going to be in less than a month, is going to be in Cork. And I hope to see many of you there. I really hope so. I'm very excited because it's the first time any of our meetings goes to Ireland. It's a small community, it's growing, and we're very happy to be able to make Cork the European capital of astronomy for just 1 week, but it'll be fun. I think it'll be a very interesting and exciting experience. Now, how do we become such a large meeting? This is like a map that shows a little history in the last 10 years. We broke the 1,000 attendee limit in 2015. That was well before I became involved in council. And then in Athens, there was a little bit of a dip, and then Prague, Liverpool, Lyon. And then the world hit a snag with COVID, right? 2020 was an interesting experience. By then I was involved in council. I was part of the organization. And just a few months before actually going to Leiden in person, where we had been organizing everything, we had everything set up, the conference center, the audio video equipment, the catering. We had to say, sorry, this is going to be virtual only. But it was an interesting and learning experience. That's what our professional conference operator told us. We were the first large conference in Europe that did entirely online. We do the full virtual conference. We did not cancel, we pulled it through. And it was an interesting experience because in that time, and I believe all of you remember, that was quite hard, especially for the Italian community, but overall, it was very nice to have a little bit of sense of community, to meet virtually, to discuss science, but also to see people on a regular basis for a week, even if it was, not the same as being together, but it was the next best thing that was possible at the time. So our colleagues in Leiden said, well, okay, we didn't do 2020. We'll try it again in 2021. We have the conference center book. We have everything. But yes, that did not work either. So we did another online meeting. And finally, we went back to an in-person meeting in 2022 in Valencia, which was overwhelmingly successful. We reached almost 2,000 participants. And we had Krakow and last year Padua. As you see, the numbers are consistently well over 1,500, and you can see the increase in number of talks and posters per year, which makes it truly a very large meeting. There are, wide variety of astrophysical topics that are discussed there. We have symposia, special session, and lunch sessions, and typically goes from the solar system all the way to deep cosmology, going through instrumentation, space missions, and everything. So there is a little bit for everyone. One thing that I think is interesting is to take a look at who are the people who attend my meetings. And because it's something we are, as a society, quite proud of. Yes, there are scientists from more than 60 countries typically attend our meetings. So they're not only Europeans, they're about 1/3 come from outside Europe regularly, with not only the US and Australia, which are community that is well-funded and travels often, well, was well-funded, and travels often and is very used to international travel. But we've established a very good relationship with Africa, and we're quite committed to enabling their participation. So we have regular participation from African astronomers. Of course, also Asia and South America are quite well represented. The most represented countries are consistently, though, the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. Typically, Italians are, except for last year where there were many more, but typically Italians make up for 10 to 12% of the attendees to the meeting. One thing that it's interesting is that about 40% of the attendees are attending the AS meeting for the first time, which might make you think that, well, it means that people, if they don't come back, if only less than 60% of the people come back, that means they didn't like it. Our interpretation is a little different because, in fact, 1 out of 5 of the attendees are students, and 1 in 2 are early career researchers, either students or postdocs, which is something that we're extremely proud of. I don't know how many of you have attended both an EAS meeting and an IU meeting, IU General Assembly, but the age distribution is quite different. So you can see that typically at our meetings, you see plenty, not only of attendees, but plenty of talks by very junior people, plenty of sessions organized by junior people. This is something that we're very proud of. It's intentional, it's deliberate, it's something that we give a lot of consideration to. And we try to enable that by working with the SOC to make sure that junior attendees get a fair share of session organizations, but also keeping the cost as low as possible. Yes, the EAS is an expensive conference to attend. I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's a very expensive conference to organize. But compared to the IU General Assembly or the AAS meeting, which are very large international meetings, it is still cheaper. It's still more affordable. It is still more accessible for early career researchers. Also, about 40% of our attendees chose female pronouns. We do not ask for gender. We just ask which pronouns would you like to have on your name tag. And about 40% choose a female pronoun. So women are well represented. It's not half, but we're on our way, and we're really promoting female participation in the meeting as well, including with initiatives like childcare, for instance.
Do you know if that number is improving with time?
So it is a little difficult to track because we started asking for pronouns only 3 years ago. So it's very difficult. We will track it, but in the longer term, we don't have the data, unfortunately. Now, okay. So as I was saying, we are committed to lowering the barrier to participation in general, because we truly want to make sure that it's accessible for a wide variety of our colleagues as much as possible. So after the 2 virtual editions, we kept the hybrid option open at different levels. It's not always possible to have it at full level because it's a resource intensive predicament. It requires considerable resources in terms of people and cost. But we've had, different levels all the way to Padua last year that was completely 100% hybrid, partly also thanks to the contribution of INAF that quite generally contributed to that as well. But it is something we're truly committed to keeping on having. We, of course, look for accessible venues because we want to make sure there's no barriers, no physical barriers to participation. And we give away a lot of financial support for on a need basis. So we have a program which is for the grants and fee waivers in which everyone can apply. And we typically give away over 50K. It changes year to year because they are generously funded by different groups. And depending on the year, how much money we gather, we might have higher than this level, but the baseline is about 50K. That generally enables about 100 scientists from less fortunate countries or underrepresented groups to attend the conference, which is something we truly appreciate. We also facilitate childcare service. This is one of the things in which we're trying to promote female participation because women are disproportionately responsible for childcare generally, and so having childcare services helps them very much in attending conferences. Again, that's not always available at the same level because childcare is pretty heavily low regulated at the national level. And so in some countries, it is extremely difficult to do it in a central way. You have to make sure that things work in different manners, but we at the very least facilitate. Sometimes it's offered, sometimes it's on site, depending whether the local legislation allows it. We also spend a lot of time and resources to trying to build an open and welcoming community. I did mention we have this advisory committee on sustainability and EDI that help us through this journey. We have, as part of our annual meeting, this characteristic that beyond the sessions on science per se, we have a number of science adjacent sessions. Those are sessions on topics of interest to astronomers as people rather than astronomers as scientists. For instance, we have reducing the carbon footprint of European astronomy was a recent meeting, but meeting on sustainability, on EDI, on mental health, on career support, and others that are related to scientific activity more directly, even if not topically on science, like science writing, publishing, or the relations with Europe, building collaborations and partnership between Europe and Africa, or other underdeveloped communities. And this is something that has been going on for a number of years, something that our attendees truly appreciate, and it made us a little bit different from other meetings, and it's something that we aim to keep. Still in the realms of promoting the excellence in research, we give away several prizes to individuals that have distinguished themselves for their contribution to astronomy, whether in the form of scientific discovery or in the form of education or in the form of enabling the careers of others. There are a number of prizes that are basically an honor, the Low Vulture Lecture, the Tycho Brahe Medal, the Jocelyn Bell Burnell Inspiration Medal, the Fritz Zwicky Medal, that are awarded for different categories, typically to senior scientists. Those are the kind of target. Whereas the Merak prizes, which are probably the most well-known, are for early career researchers and PhD theses. Those have as a focus more junior scientists. And unlike the medals, they do come with price. So that means that you get funding with a price to use for your research. And it is substantial funding. It's not a small amount of money. So it is quite, it can be quite important for the career, an early career researcher to get the prize, not only because it's something that does look good on someone's CVs, but because it comes with a grant to use for the research. Very recently, Merak has established the George Lake Technology Innovation Award. And it's an award meant more for mid-career scientists that do work, especially in computational astrophysics or numerical application and machine learning applications to astrophysics. And that comes with an extremely generous price, This is, the first edition was in 2024. The next one will be in 2026. So if you know someone that applies for this, the call will go out in July. Please nominate them. That brings me to my next point, which is that Italy does really not do well with our prizes. And not because they're not good people, but most of the Italians that have been honored or gotten prizes from the EAS have done so for work done outside of Italy. And this is not because the only talented Italian astronomers go abroad, not at all. It's just because nominations for prizes do not come from Italy, and this is quite unfortunate. We give prizes to people who are nominated. Someone sends a nomination, we evaluate the prize committee, not the council, evaluates the nomination and then decides. There are very, very few nominations coming from Italy, which is truly unfortunate because I know there's plenty of talent, plenty of brilliant scientists that, however, do not get put forward for this kind of recognition. And it's a missed opportunity. So please, next time, if you or any of your colleagues get an email with an invitation to nominate and you know someone, please do so. If you want to be nominated, you're a young scientist, wants to be nominated, say, for a Merak Prize, please knock on someone's door and ask them, please nominate me. This is important. Otherwise, you're never going to get a prize unless this happens. And these are truly, big honors, big recognitions come with a fair amount of money. So lean in, come forward. That's the only way you're ever going to get one of these prizes. Now, moving on to more of the back of the house activities, meaning things that are not so visible to the astronomical community, but they're activities that we consider important and our community also considers important. We do engage quite extensively with the European Parliament and the European Commission. Starting from the Parliament, organizing events at the European Parliament is one of the ways in which, well, first of all, we make them aware, make those legislators aware of the fact that astronomy in Europe is a powerhouse. We're very competitive. We're leaders in many fields. And we rely on their support to continue to be leaders in that fields. And the only way we can do that, we can communicate that kind of activities. It's not the only way, but one of the key ways is actually to organize and engage with the Parliament itself. So we have been, we organized 2 meetings recently, well, within the last 5 years, one on Gaia, that was in 2019, one on exoplanets, that was a couple of years ago. We had a long break because of COVID, so I had a long break until 2023. We had to wait 4 years instead of 3. And we're actually organizing another one for 2026 on the future ground-based large European facilities, which is, of course, a topic of interest because it has industrial returns, but at the same time, it's also a way in which different members of parliament can support and bolster their own community within the legislation. Naturally, on the other hand, the counterpart is to engage with the Commission. The Commission is more on the side of deciding on the funding strategies and aspects like that. So the Commission is intrinsically quite different also because as the Parliament changes constantly, every round of election, you have a completely different, well, not a completely different, but considerably different group of people that is actually engaging with you. Whereas with the Commission, you tend to build longer relationships. And we've been building and working on them for years, and we are at the point in which we have fairly regular interaction. The most obvious one is one that is open to everyone, in which we actually provide feedback through open calls for input. The Commission regularly has this kind of calls. Italy is not great in responding to this kind of initiatives because, unlike other countries, there's not a coherently organized science lobbying in Brussels or a group that does that on behalf of Italy. Like our countries are extremely well organized. But these possibilities are open to everyone. There are calls on, recently there was one on the funding infrastructure. There was another on funding strategy that closed just a couple of days ago. So those are open comments in which we strive to provide feedback based on our knowledge of the community after talking with our policy group, or based on things like the astronaut roadmap, this kind of things. There are also direct contact that is initiated by us. Specifically, we've been a lot in contact with concerned satellite constellation, and the idea and the plans that the European Union has to launch their own satellite constellation, IRIS², which is moving forward. And we have been spending a lot of time making sure that they're aware of the issues that they create for astronomy, and we've been working on ways in which they could design mitigation measures from the beginning on the satellite constellation. And also sometimes they actually come to us with requests. For instance, they wanted to know, have a census of astronomical facilities. This is something that was European astronomical facilities, which is not an easy task. Keep in mind, I mean, finding out big telescopes, very easy, but there are a multitude of lesser telescopes across Europe that are quite difficult to document, and the Commission was interested in having an idea of this kind of things. Often you don't know exactly why they ask you, but the Commission asks you, you give them answer. Okay, 5 minutes, sorry, I'll try to. We also interact with the UN Committee for the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, which is the organization, the UN organization that governs the exploration and use of space for the benefit of humanity. Peace, security, and development. The Society is a permanent observer at COPUOS since 2023, and we mostly work on space sustainability and dark and quiet sky discussion. Now, we've also contributed to the astronaut roadmap, the strategic plan for European astronomy. Our contribution was that the AES is part of the board, but mostly we've spent a fair amount of time to bring this to the attention of the Commission and to other players, like for the committee that governs the ESPRI infrastructure, et cetera, other players in the European landscape. Mentioning again, dark and quiet sky protection, we've been very active on that. A lot of our interaction with the Commission, with the UN Office for Outer Space, have been focused on this issue, which is quite important and urgent for us. We are one of the contributing societies, one of the contributing members to the Center for the Protection of Dark and Quiet Sky from Satellite Constellation Interference, which is a mouthful, I realize. It's an initiative spearheaded by the IAU, and it's now carried out by SKAO in Europe and MORLAB in the US. And it's a forum to discuss multifaceted expertise that is required to attack this issue. So it does not only include astronomers, but there's also industry players, their policymakers, their funding agencies. And the idea is to have, which is actually happening, a forum to discuss and devise a way in which astronomy is not too damaged by the plans for industry coming to fruition. In this context, after a lot of work, one of our main successes, which I'm very proud of because we as society were the driving force behind it, spent a lot of time liaising with the national affiliated societies for the 4 European countries in the G7 to make sure that the science ministries were aware of the enormous impact that satellite constellations has on astronomy, not only for the damage it brings to the discovered space, but also the damage it brings to their own investment, right? All these countries invest considerably in astronomy through ESO or through other facilities, SKAO, CTIO, that the impact it has is non-negligible. It's a number, it's a big number. It's a big amount of money. So spent a lot of time liaising, and after many weeks of work, we got a mention on the G7 Science and Technology Ministers Communique, which is an incredible achievement. That was a major turning point. After that, dark and quiet sky became a buzzword with the Commission, with the UN, with a number of different organizations. It has become like a brand. So everyone knows what we're talking about when we mention dark and quiet sky. Other activities we do in terms of good citizenship and widening the access to astronomy we are part of the European Regional Office for Astronomy for Development, which is an original initiative by the IAU based in South Africa that has regional offices. The European one is managed independently, but the members is the AES and Leiden Observatory and NOVA. And there have been a number of activities aimed at using astronomy as a development tool, as a human capital development tool. And the next event in this context will be a meeting in 2 weeks on the recovery plan for using astronomy for the recovery plan for Ukraine, which is going to be quite interesting. And we'll also, I mentioned that already, we have a lot of tight relationship with the African Society with the aim of supporting their development and creating collaborations. We have a workshop series, which is aimed at early career researchers, the HERO workshop series. Maybe some of you have applied or attended them. They're funded by the Heroes Foundation, which quite generously covers most of the expenses, including for attendees. So if you're interested, you should apply for it. We've had 2 editions. First one in Munich a couple of years ago. We had one in Athens last year, and next one will be in Pisa, so even quite close. So if this is something that you're interested in doing by any means, I can give you the link and please apply. We have career events at the annual meetings that have started a little bit slow, and we paused for a minute, but we're hoping to revive them because we're interested in providing support also to early career researchers and students that are considering pursuing different paths. I mean, academia is not the only path in this life, and so we're trying to create a group of industry players that will come and have like career events at our meetings. We're starting with the outreach and public engagement. That's not in our core mission because that largely is done at the national level in the national language. English is not very accessible to most European countries, but we do support our national affiliated societies in their efforts, and we encourage them to share good practices and to share content and facilitate the translation and those kind of efforts as much as possible. And with this, I don't have a concluding slide. I'm done, and I will thank you for listening, and I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So,
Thank you.
They don't hear you.
I'll shout. You showed before the advisory committee that to me takes care of concrete issues for the community. So I was wondering, I think one of the most pressing issues, and that is becoming more and more pressing, is everything that concerns the publishing process. Is there any plan for us to take interest in that?
That's an interesting point. It is clear that the publishing models that worked for many years cannot survive much longer. We already know that monthly notices changed their policy, as well as as ANA, it has started changing. I'm not sure they will be able to hold the actual pattern for long. We'll see. This is something we have started discussing. We have a special session at our annual meeting in Cork on this to discuss publication business models and policies and possible paths for the future with the requirements that we have from the Commission for Open Access and all that. It is an interesting thought to consider having an advisory committee on this. We have not specifically thought of this in this term, but we have definitely started thinking and discussing the issue as one of the pressing issue in our community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sara. So I didn't understand, maybe I missed it, for the cooperation part. If ESA is funding, for instance, a postdoctoral position, PhD networks, or whether on purpose this is not done because it overlaps with faculty or that.
So the budget of the society is quite small. We would not be able to fund ourselves anything. So the prices we give, for instance, or the support we provide is through organizational members who give us money for specific things. But we're not talking anywhere close to budgets that will enable us to have regular Marie Curie grants. So the merit prizes come with their own money. The prize comes with money for that person, and they can choose to either, depending on whether they have already a position, they might choose to use it for a postdoctoral position or pay themselves. That changes year to year. That's very different. But this is not, I mean, the EAS selects through the prize committee selects the winners, but the money is handed by NORAC. It's never something that it's not our funding. No way. I hope it makes sense. So it's not, we're truly, I mean, of the European societies, the only one that is truly well-funded that has an endowment is the Royal Astronomical Society. All the others are quite small, including us. We spend a lot of time on fundraising efforts, a lot of time. And we have some success, and we are optimistic that our situation might change to some extent in the coming years for better. But we're not at the stage in which we can give out regularly this kind of support, unfortunately, as much as we would wish to.
any other curiosity?
I see online.
So we were
Sorry.
shout.
Yeah, what is the role that the EAS can have in the recent changes in policies about funding the European astronomical community, let's say? We see that lately there are a lot of changes in that terms, maybe also in the local level. So I don't know if Europe, from a European point of view, something can be done, but for example, in the funding that get cut, and so problems in finding compensating this lack of fundings. Is the EAS, which is in contact with the European Parliament or Commission, working on something? Can they do anything?
I will repeat the question for those online, which I doubt heard you. So the question was whether the EAS can or is doing something about changes in funding policies and funding cuts or budget cuts for science in some cases. So for what concerns European funding, so funding that is given out by the Commission, we are asked sometimes to provide input about strategy or priorities. We are one of the many actors, keep in mind. I mean, there are many, there's a multitude of actors that provide input. So they will ask us, the Physics Society, they will ask APEC. I mean, they will ask a number of major players that. And they will take the input. It's not like they tell you how they took the input, but sometimes you can spot that they consider the points you made. At the national level, no. The national level is the national societies that do that. Some national societies are very active in advocating for funding with their own ministry. They're very, the Royal Astronomical Society is a very obvious point. The Royal Astronomical Society holds has regular meetings with with funding agencies and also policymakers on specific topics. They're actually asked to comment or provide input. Others do not, at least to my knowledge, almost ever interact at that level. So there's a wide variety of approaches. Us, as European Astronomical Society, for what concerns the national level, the only thing we do sometimes is to support the endeavor of the National Society more in terms of providing input that they can use to lobby locally. We do not take, of course, it would be inappropriate for us to write to a national government. It's not the rightful approach. But the National Society, we sometimes, for issues like the G7 was an example. The EAS did not write to any of the ministries of science, but got in touch with the national societies and made sure that provided, the input, the template letter to use, the content that could be conveyed, and encouraged the national societies to act on their local ministry, on the national ministries, because that is a national prerogative and that is done at the national level. And that applies also to national funding, of course.
The picture taken of the G7 is really unusual because of the gender balance.
Ah, yes,
And I
especially for
found-
ministers of science.
Yes, the ministries of
Yeah,
science
yeah.
were almost
Okay.
all
Yep.
women presenting.
Mhm. Yep,
So that's
it's very unusual.
very, very, very.
Mhm.
So if no one else has any curiosity right now, let's turn.
Dipende dai paesi, perché ci sono dei